The name of the high-security penal colony Vladimirsky Central is well known to almost everyone from the eponymous song by a famous artist. And in Matrosskaya Tishina, the most famous thief and law Yaponchik was once held. Today we will tell you about the most terrifying prisons in Russia, how they house particularly dangerous criminals, delve into the daily routines of life prisoners, and uncover the horrors that occur behind the walls of such institutions. In theory, a prison should transform a person and guide them onto the right path, preventing them from repeating their crimes upon release. However, not all correctional facilities can achieve this. For example, Norwegian prisons resemble real hotels. In these institutions, inmates can play video games, reside in comfortable rooms with private bathrooms, and engaged in hobbies, play musical instruments, indulge in sports, and spend a lot of time outdoors. This presents criminals with a different standard of living, one they may strive for once they leave the correctional facility. But not all countries offer such excellent conditions for inmates. In Russia, authorities prefer not to allocate substantial resources to maintain people in prisons. Moreover, there are no rehabilitation programs for those released from Russian correctional facilities. While Europe has distinct programs for rehabilitating offenders, Russia lacks such initiatives. This poses a significant problem since most released inmates in Russia struggle to find employment, returning to their former lifestyles, repeatedly breaking the law. According to statistics, around 40% of released inmates in Russia end up back in prison, while in Europe this percentage is substantially lower, around 20%. In Russia, prisons are more about intimidation than rehabilitation. Everyone has heard about the terrible conditions inside these correctional institutions. The history of the prison called Matrosskaya Tishina dates back to the distant year of 1775. At that time, it was established as a reformatory for petty thieves and fraudsters. Later, in 1870, it was renamed to the Moscow Correctional Prison, and additional buildings and structures were constructed for future inmates. The correctional colony was designed to house 450 inmates, with 300 of them being male and 150 female. In 1918, the prison served as the basis for a reformatory for juveniles. In 1946, the correctional prison was reclassified to accommodate adult offenders, and since then, the prison has been operating at full capacity. In 1949, the number of buildings increased to 3. In the new building, initially Nazi war criminals were held. Later, it was repurposed as an isolation facility for juveniles, and subsequently, it housed inmates suffering from tuberculosis. Matrosskaya Tishina has held some very well-known personalities, including politicians Mikhail Khodorkovsky and Sergei Polonsky, the infamous fraudster Sergei Mavrodi, and even the thief-in-law Yaponchik. However, the conditions in which such famous and wealthy individuals are held differ greatly from those of ordinary criminals. Matrosskaya Tishina is a vast isolation facility with numerous buildings. Some of them have been recently renovated, while others appear untouched for centuries. Within the prison, there are so-called VIP cells. They are spacious, equipped with separate showers and toilets, and some even have large televisions. The renovations are completely new, and everything looks more like a hotel room than a prison cell. It is said that to gain access to these rooms, one must pay a substantial sum. However, exact figures are kept secret. But if an ordinary criminal rather than a wealthy or famous individual enters the prison, they should be prepared. Regular cells designed for 7 to 8 people are often overcrowded. They have not seen renovations for a long time, with floors and walls appearing horrifying. In the buildings where such cells are located, there's a terrible smell. People literally sleep on top of each other, as there is no space to place mattresses, not even on the floor. In cells where 10 to 15 inmates are often housed, there is only one toilet, and they're allowed to shower once a week. Needless to say, the conditions in which people are held are horrendous. And next you will learn about the prison from which no one has ever escaped into freedom. Every Russian criminal dreads hearing the name of this prison when their sentence is pronounced. Black Dolphin was established in 1773 and was originally designed for bandits and participants of the Pugachev Rebellion. Initially, it was a penal colony where inmates worked in the Iletsk salt mines. The salt mining labor was carried out by exiles, individuals subjected to criminal punishment that involved their forced relocation to Siberia. In 1849, the salt mines were replaced with mining industries. In the early 2000s, Black Dolphin was reclassified as a prison for life sentences. This meant that it would house especially dangerous criminals, terrorists, and cannibals who should never be free again. According to some reports, the colony was designed to accommodate 1,600 inmates. Unfortunately or fortunately, it currently houses around 900 criminals. Black Dolphin operates under a high-security regime with very strict rules. In the colony, there is strict isolation of inmates from each other. In the cells, there are 2 to 4 people at most, and psychologists decide with whom the inmates will live. This is done intentionally to reduce the number of fights and conflicts within the colony. Some extremely dangerous criminals are held in solitary cells. For instance, there's the cannibal Vladimir Nikolaev, who killed 2 people, dismembered them, ate some of their remains, and sold the rest to his acquaintances or in the market. Additionally, in the colony, inmates wake up at 6 in the morning and they're prohibited from sitting or lying on their bunks for the following 16 hours. When transitioning from one building to another, the inmates' eyes are covered to prevent them from memorizing the layout, and they are escorted by at least 3 people, one of whom is a dog handler with a dog. Every 15 minutes, the prison staff inspect all the cells. Inmates sleep with the lights on, and they're under constant surveillance, as video cameras are installed everywhere. Furthermore, the cells themselves are like a cage within a cage, with windows and doors additionally separated by thick iron bars. Inmates' outdoor time lasts for 1.5 hours and takes place in a special enclosure with concrete walls and a steel mesh roof. These harsh conditions are deliberately designed to ensure that no one can ever escape from Black Dolphin. And as time has shown, this was not done in vain. Throughout its modern history, no one has managed to escape from it. By the way, the prison got its name from Black Dolphin figurines made by the inmates. And next, you will learn about the most modern prison for life-sentenced inmates. The correctional colony, colloquially known as Snowflake, became the newest institution in Russia and at the same time the only one of its kind in the Far East. The facility operates under a special security regime similar to that implemented at the Black Dolphin. Construction began in 1996, with the initial plan being to create a detention center for 800 inmates. However, they were only able to complete the work in 2012, and the facility was put into operation in 2014. The name Snowflake arose from the distinctive shape of the building. The structures formed a 7-rayed pattern that bore a resemblance to a snowflake. In 2016, the detention center housed only 68 suspects. Most of the building remained idle, prompting the decision in 2017 to reclassify the facility from a detention center to a life-sentence prison. In September of the same year, the facility began receiving especially dangerous criminals. The reclassification was done not only due to the detention center's underutilization, but also because there were plans to close the Black Hawk prison for life-sentence inmates, from where a significant portion of the inmates in Snowflake originated. You'll hear the history of the Black Hawk prison right now. Correctional colony number 56 is located in the Sverdlovsk region. It received its name, Black Hawk, for a reason similar to that of the Black Dolphin. Inside the prison's grounds, there is a concrete sculpture of a Black Hawk, which clutches the head of a defeated snake in its talons. It's worth noting that the same self-taught sculptor Vladimir Central was involved in creating sculptures for both institutions. He had committed 2 murders and a rape during the Soviet era. He was initially sentenced to death, but his punishment was later commuted to 25 years in prison. During the Soviet Union, this facility was the only prison for the confinement of especially dangerous criminals who had their death sentences commuted to 20 years in a high-security prison. After the introduction of life imprisonment as a punishment for criminals, another special building was constructed at Black Hawk to house such inmates. Its history isn't extensive. It opened in 1935 to house particularly dangerous criminals. In 1989, inmates staged a riot, taking prison staff hostage, demanding money and transportation for their escape. The facility was surrounded by the military, forcing the inmates to surrender. The only condition they set was not to increase their sentences for the uprising. Whether this condition was fulfilled is unknown. Since then, there have been no escape attempts. It's worth noting the prison's location. It is situated on a cliff, making it impossible to create an underground passage. This is a relatively common method of escape from prisons. To ensure that staff wouldn't assist the inmates in any way, there's a sign on each cell that indicates the inmate's name, details of their crimes, and the ages of their victims. Life-sentenced inmates are housed in a separate building from those with sentences of 20 to 25 years. They share cells with one other inmate, and instead of toilets, they have basic buckets. Inmates are required to get up at 6 in the morning, and they are not allowed to sit or lie on their bunks until lights out at 10 p.m. There are 2 libraries available for inmates, one secular and one spiritual. In the case of inmates serving 20 to 25-year sentences, they are allowed to work. However, this is not permitted for those serving life sentences. Inmates work in the sawmill, carpentry shop, garage and garden. According to the conditions in 2011, Black Hawk was considered one of the cleanest correctional facilities in Russia. Starting in 2017, inmates were gradually transferred from the prison primarily to the Snowflake correctional colony, and in 2019 it was completely closed. The famous song Vladimir Central by Mikhail Krug is named after the correctional colony in the city of Vladimir. The term central in the name indicates the central significance of the prison within the city or district. The colony was built in 1783 under the decree of Catherine the Great. It acquired its now cult name in 1906. During the same period, political prisoners were also held in the prison. Currently, the prison is designated for especially dangerous criminals. It houses serial killers, rapists, terrorists, and has a long-standing reputation for harsh detention conditions. The facility operates at the highest level of security, which is why, according to some reports, there has not been a single successful escape from the prison. Regarding the conditions for especially dangerous inmates, Vladimir Central doesn't differ significantly from other high-security facilities. These criminals are housed in a special block with reinforced security. There is a strict daily routine. Inmates are only moved under escort, and a K9 unit inspects the cells before they are opened. Next on the list is one of Russia's most terrifying prisons. The maximum security correctional colony for life-sentenced inmates, known as Polar Owl, is located in the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug. The prison is designed for over 1,000 people, but at present there are around 400 inmates serving their sentences there. It was opened in 1961, and the first detainees were involved in the construction of the Transpolar Railway. The prison received its status as a colony for life-sentenced inmates in 2004. This is when the most dangerous criminals from all over the country began to be brought there. Information about life inside the colony is scarce, as is information about what goes on there in general. However, from time to time there have been very public scandals. In 2014, one officer working at Polar Owl was convicted. According to some reports, in 2010, he coerced over 190 people into confessing to crimes they may not have committed. He used violent methods to extract confessions from inmates, and the techniques he employed were horrifying. If an individual refused to give a statement, they were subjected to physical violence. Psychological tactics were also heavily employed to break an individual's spirit. Additionally, sexual violence by inmates wasn't uncommon. What's happening inside the prison right now remains unknown. By the way, this is the only high-security correctional institution in modern Russia from which a criminal sentenced to death has been released. In August 1991, Anvar Masalimov, in a drunken brawl, strangled his friend and then dismembered him. He was initially sentenced to execution, but he didn't live to see his sentence carried out. Russia introduced a moratorium on death penalty, which led to a change in his punishment. By the way, this wasn't his first murder. In the end, due to changes in legislation and persistent legal battles by the criminal, he was released in 2016. Anvar Masalimov didn't remain free for long. In 2019, he was sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison for causing grievous bodily harm. Today you've learned about the most horrifying prisons in Russia that every criminal fears. Thanks for watching.